Hello, everyone. We're just going to give it 1 minute for make sure everyone can get connected. We've had some reports that things may be a bit slow out there today.
Slow can be good on a busy day. We've
Slow day.
this up here in Alaska, where the leaves are almost all fallen from the trees, and I kind of gave up on taking the leaf blower to the driveway. It's like, let me just wait until the rest of it comes down.
Yeah, here it's practically still summer. It's not too bad. All right, let's get started. So, hello, everyone, and welcome to our best practices webinar, Tarana RF score using Preseem. All right, so let's take a quick look at what we're going to be covering today. We're going to start with a few quick housekeeping notes and introductions so you can get to know who's here with you today. After that, we'll dive into the main part of the session. So we're going to start with an intro to Preseem, take a look at the different scores available on the platform, and then we'll jump into a live demo where we'll walk through some examples of users on RF networks and some use cases around Tarana. Once we wrap up the demo, Jeremy and I are going to chat a little bit about some future topics, some Tarana G2, some AI, which people always like to talk about. And then we're really excited to welcome Drew Beverage from 360 Broadband, who's going to share how his team has been using Tarana RF scores to get insights and improve their operations. And then finally, we'll close things out with any questions that we weren't able to get to during the presentation. Okay, so some housekeeping stuff here. I'd like to highlight a few tools on your screen that will be useful during today's webinar. On the right-hand side, you'll find interactive section with chat, Q&A, and polls. So if you could use the Q&A tool to submit questions throughout the session, that'll be helpful. It's easier to read them than looking through the chat, and we'll answer as many as we can throughout the session. It'll help just make it a little more conversational. We've got the chat tool available for you to share comments or engage with other attendees during the webinar. And polls will pop up during the session. We encourage you to participate in the polls. There will be a couple. During our session, at the top right of your screen, you will see the free RF ebook button, and that allows you to download a free resource from Preseem that lets you get some insights on capacity planning and RF management. And finally, today's webinar is being recorded. You'll receive an email within 48 hours with a link to the recording so you can rewatch it or share it with others. Okay, so we're each going to introduce ourselves. My name is Scot Loach. I'm CTO at Preseem, and I've spent the past 25-ish years building network equipment for ISPs in different companies, and the past 7 or so of those have been spent developing Preseem. I spend most of my time at Preseem working on just understanding the problems and opportunities in the regional ISP industry and bringing that back to build the future of Preseem, making sure we continue our mission to solve real business problems for all of you and to help regional ISPs thrive with a product that people love to use. And I'm speaking to you today from the Preseem headquarters in Waterloo, Ontario. And I am joined by Jeremy Austin.
I'm on the West Coast. I'm here in Anchorage, Alaska, and I've been in the industry kind of a similar length of time to Scott, but only in the past 5 years or so on the product side. I worked at regional telcos and internet service providers it's actually getting closer to 30 years now, but let's call it 25, nice round numbers. And I really enjoy building the products here at Preseem, learning from my experiences as an operator and continuing to kind of act as a liaison with the operator community to make sure that we're really building on the data that we collect and we're making tools that are useful and exciting. And I love coming to work every day, even though I'm the West Coast side.
Great. We've also got Angie in the background. You probably won't hear from her unless something goes horribly wrong. So we'll kick it off, I think, with a poll. So your network holds the answers to your biggest operational challenges, but those answers are scattered across vendor tools, buried in data, or simply not visible. So today we're going to show you how Preseem brings it all together, and we've got a poll to kick things off.
Yeah, this is an interesting, talking about multi-vendor deployments. It's one of those, I've known, several WISPs and network operators that got into doing WISP work who went in kind of starry-eyed with a particular vendor thinking, I'm going to be able to do everything that I need with one vendor. And I have yet to see it really, it really turn out that way, right? It's everybody has a specialty, and then as time goes by, you have stuff that ends up being kind of brownfield. It's been around a while, a little long in the tooth, but you still run it sometimes for many years, even decades, in parallel with other equipment. So networks tend to be, as they grow over time, to be pretty heterogeneous.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our customers end up acquiring other companies as well, and then maybe they didn't have the same technology that they had. So you do tend to end up with a multi-vendor network over time, and then
Yeah,
multi-access as well as a lot of custom companies that started out in wireless are getting into fiber.
cool, cool.
Okay, so I'm going to set the stage a bit by talking about Preseem, what it is, how we think about it, and how we sort of pitch it, and the different parts of it. So the way we talk about it today, there are three distinct feature sets in Preseem. So first, there's the Preseem platform. That's what this slide is kind of talking about. And the Preseem platform is a layer of technology that integrates with your network devices, such as access points, OLTs, routers, and it also integrates with your billing systems, either by calling their APIs or by having them call our APIs. And from this data, it builds a real time model of your network topology, including how everything connects together and where customer services are attached to the network. It also collects performance data and inventory data from the network so that you can use Preseem to view the metrics and historical charts you'd normally have to go to vendor systems or directly to the devices to see. So the idea here is that you can use Preseem as a single pane of glass for 90% of the use cases that you would otherwise have to go to various other systems, usually more than one, to find. So this makes operating and supporting your network more efficient, especially if you're running both wireless and fiber and have multiple vendor systems in place. So one thing we've heard a lot of that this makes training new employees much more efficient, since they don't need to be trained on every vendor platform, and it helps you have a more secure network since you don't need to share as many device credentials with as many people, and maybe not every all of your staff needs an account on every system. Preseem integrates with your existing authentication provider to give you a single sign-on. It automatically creates new accounts for you for users on your domain, and it automatically to exiting restricts access to existing employees. So if someone leaves, you don't have to remember to disable their account in Preseem. One of our largest customers recently told us that by making Preseem the sort of first tool used by their tier one support agents, they were able to reduce their onboarding time for a new support tech from 5 weeks to 2 weeks, as just one example of the impact having a single platform like this can have. It also makes support calls much quicker to escalate and solve, and we'll talk about some examples of that in this webinar. So that's the Preseem sort of base platform. And then on top of that, we have two additional feature sets that are separately licensable. First, there's our QoE platform. So this is a network appliance that sits at your network core, bridges all traffic through it, and applies adaptive queue management algorithms to your customer plans and access points to maximize the quality of experience your subscribers can get from your network. In addition to making the network feel faster for your subscribers, our QoE platform also measures throughput, latency, and retransmits. And we analyze this data to find where problems are occurring due to overloaded or underperforming parts of the network. And then finally, our advanced fixed wireless analytics goes a level deeper to understand not just where problems are occurring, but also why problems are occurring in your RF network. So it can tell you what's good and what's bad in your fixed wireless network so that you can be proactive in addressing problems. And that's really going to be the focus of what we talk about in the rest of this webinar. And I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy to introduce advanced fixed wireless. I think if you introduce it, then we've got another poll.
Do we have another poll, Angie? Checking on that.
I
Yeah,
think it
so I'll
takes a
give it.
minute.
Yeah, here we
Thanks.
go. Biggest challenge. Awesome. So one of the problems that we realized the operators face is, there's a lot of data to crunch. It can take a lot of time to, to learn how to interpret that data. If you are coming at it from like the RF engineering perspective, get experience with how equipment actually performs in the field. And one of the things we saw is like in a smaller network, it may be, one person who's done the installs and monitors them after installation. It could be even up to like a 10-person company. You might have a very limited set of people that are actually in the RF day after day. And it's definitely one of the cases in a multi-vendor network where, you really are having to jump between a bunch of tools. In addition to even if you know how to use them, you're still having to jump between a lot of tools. So we created our advanced fixed wireless set of tools at Preseem to kind of solve a bunch of these problems at once. And I'll talk about the methodology a little bit and then briefly go through the primary outputs of advanced fixed wireless. So because it's a chaotic environment, could take years to master. So we really want people to be able to understand, users of Preseem, whether you're in ops or support, we really want you to be able to understand the quality and health of the RF network. How is the network performing? Is it performing as good as can be expected, since all environments will vary, not just over time, but also in geography? There's folks on the coast who have no interference, and there's folks in the urban environment that have 7 different providers to contend with. So having measurements that are the same across all vendors. So for example, if we look at a Ubiquiti or a Cambium or a Tarana radio, we want to be able to use the same metrics to be able to understand them rather than a proprietary metric. And it isn't necessarily to pit one vendor against another. That we do that in other ways. But to be kind of spec agnostic, where we don't really have to know necessarily what a particular piece of equipment is good for. We want to understand, is it performing the best that it can in the circumstances under which I've deployed it? And we want you to not have to know ahead of time how well this equipment performs. And then we take that and we take all that data and we create these benchmarks using all of our customer networks across the globe, which ends up being a pretty significant amount of data to crunch. And the more you have, the more accurate it can be. So instead of just relying on the data that you might be able to see in your own network or the data that one vendor can provide you, we can provide you with data from all of the vendors. And then we do this by giving you a pretty easy to understand 0 to 10 score, where 10 is good and 0 is not good. And it makes it pretty easy to compare two elements. Like, for example, if you have a bunch of CPEs on an AP and you want to see how they're doing, you can compare them very easily. And Scott will show some examples as we go on. And then we've optimized this approach to find like pesky chronic problems. That is, problems that are occurring over time that might be, even if they're intermittent, it might be problems that would be hard to really diagnose, to determine, well, I know it's not working so well, but is it really a problem? Is it really affecting my network? So we help you do these operations that would otherwise take a lot of crunching. Let's go ahead. I can control the slide, right? There we go. Okay, so I'll start very quickly going through our primary scores here. The first one is at the CPE level, where we just call it simply an RF score, and it characterizes a number of dimensions, specifically how well the link rates are doing and how stable they are. And we're doing that, compared to other equipment that would have the same configuration, the same let's call it operational parameters. For example, if you're running one radio at 40 megahertz wide, it's going to have different link rates from one that's running at 80 megahertz total capacity. And so we're not going to be comparing those two against each other. We're going to be comparing them to other radios in the same configuration. So that dimension gives you you can see here this little chart, you can see red, yellow, blue, green. We have this kind of 4-color system. and it makes it really easy to understand, is this equipment operating in a degraded state, or is this going to be healthy enough to allow me to deliver a good quality of experience? The next one we have is, we call it the business value score, and that one takes this concept of measuring how the RF environment is doing, and it also adds in subscriber behavior. So when we talk about whether a subscriber is actually having an impact on your network, are they destroying value in the network? For example, are they using more airtime than is really good for them to be using? You could have a user that maybe has a poor connection, but never uses the connection to any great degree. That's clearly going to be a user that is of less. They're putting less demand on the network, and so if you were trying to decide which radios to go fix first in the field, if you have degradation, you can say which ones are causing the most damage to AP capacity, and you'd prioritize fixing those. Whereas if you're talking about just raising capacity overall, independent from customer usage, then you can still identify those CPE radios and the subscribers attached to them by sorting by RF score. Now let's go up a level to the AP level. At the AP level, we're going to have an AP-based RF score, which is very simple. It's the aggregation of all the CPEs that are underneath it. So you can see overall how well is this AP performing. And then we have a health score, which is a little bit more complicated. It combines the RF score along with several other dimensions. The AP load, for example, is the AP being contended because you have more CPEs attached than is healthy? And then similarly, if you are loading up that AP with traffic to the point where airtime airtime availability is a problem, all vendors will give you this concept of how much airtime is consumed, but we kind of flip that on its head a little bit and normalize that in the real world against, well, how much airtime can you practically have available and have remaining? So that lets you tell, okay, well, when I'm down to 50% airtime remaining, across an entire day averaged out, then that's pretty critically low. There are going to be times of the day where I absolutely will have more demand than supply. So we give you those same scores so you can see, exactly how this is affecting the overall access point health. So you can find problems before the customer even complains, things that are going to be a problem in the future. By the time the customer experience degrades, you will have already had some early warning. So if that's something that you want to take proactive action on as an operator, you're able to do that pretty easily. You can identify those overloaded access points and find the specific subscribers that are really causing the most trouble. And then you can decide, do I need to add capacity in the network, or do I need to maybe move those subscribers to another tower? All the operational actions that you could take. And at the support level, you can immediately tell, okay, am I having a problem in delivering service to this customer? Scott will show some more examples of that when we get to the live demo portion. And then lastly, for the access point, we have this concept of subscriber capacity. So we look at how much airtime is available, and we look at the behavior of the subscribers on your network at the peak hour. And then we can then give you a metric very simply expressed in terms of subscribers of whether your access point can handle more subscribers, or in the case of this kind of dramatic example here, where you actually have more subscribers or more subscriber activity on that access point than we really recommend. And so you're able to see not just how much capacity do I have on that single access point, but you can also look at your network as a whole and say, okay, how much more capacity do I have to sell? This can be a tool that you can use when marketing to new areas as well. So you can tell both when the network is overloaded and when you have excess capacity. So that's I think as far in as I want to go, Scott, on the details of that. Shall we get to some real examples now?
Let's do it. Live demos are always fun.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Take it away.
All right. All right. So what I've got here is a real Preseem customer, and it's highly anonymized and redacted, so there should not be any personally identifiable information that comes up here at all. So we're going to go through a couple of use cases that we've kind of talked about or pre-selected here. So we're going to start with just looking at the CPE radio view here. And so you see all the CPE radios. There's 19,000, or I guess like 12,000 online in this system. So what we're going to do is we're going to sort by RF score, and this is sort of showing that proactive network ops use case that the RF score is really intended for. So you can see here at the top right the different breakdowns of RF scores. So most of them in this network are in the OK category, which is kind of optimally operating. There's 194 that are in this critical area, and those are probably the ones that you should prioritize looking into, because these could be a churn risk for these subscribers. And we'll look at some examples. I just want to sort by the worst. Okay, and you can see that this is a multi-vendor network. So this has got some Cambium PMP 450s and some Tarana and probably some other things if we go down the list. So we're just gonna pick on one of the Taranas here and take a look at what this one looks like. So in here, you've got your RF score, and you can see the history of that. You can see the link rates that this should be able to achieve over time. So the receive that's a downstream to the CP radio, this is looking, it's pretty bad. It's not stable at all. It kind of varies between
Wow.
like 2
None.
megabits and 30 megabits. So this is not looking great. Lots of diagnostics showing up here. um, So there's a couple things we can do from here. So let's go to the service view for this customer and see how that's actually impacting them. So you can see this customer is on a 50 by 10 plan, and you can see in the download rate chart here. So this green line is what they should be able to achieve, and the yellow line here, this particular company has Preseem's QoE metrics, so you can see the very high granularity peak rates that the subscriber is actually able to achieve. And you can see that they're getting about what we saw with the link rate, right? They're getting up to maybe 25 to, here's a peak of 45 here. And most of the time they're not achieving a very high bit rate. And with the latency here, you can see that the sort of 80th percentile is what we use to kind of emulate the typical experience of a subscriber. And that's really not good. The subscriber is going to have a pretty slow feeling internet experience as a result of this. So that is something that should be proactively addressed for sure. We do have a deep link right from the CPE radio into TCS. So if you wanted to go and look at the more advanced diagnostics that you can get out of TCS for Tarana, you can go look at the path loss and try to understand from that whether this is maybe an interference issue or if it's some sort of maybe CBRS issue in this case. So that's kind of how you would drill into these from this starting point of CPE radios. And your goal here probably is to try to address these 194 critical instances. So some of them might be fixable without a truck roll, and some of them are probably going to require some sort of service call to address. You want to say anything else there, Jeremy? On that one?
Just that it's up to the operator whether they want to prioritize based on the business value score. Like this is a really useful filter. Let's look at the worst ones and then also take that user behavior into account. And you'll note that most of these are already bad. Like if the RF score is this bad, you're probably gonna, it's just gonna give you an additional dimension to sort by. Maybe you do some grouping where you handle a particular region in a particular way, or you kind of optimize your truck rolls. That could be an additional tool for that.
Yeah. Did you want me to drill into one of these, or just
No, that's good.
Yeah.
I was
okay.
just.
All right. So there's another one here that I thought was kind of an interesting example. I'm just going to share a different tab. Excuse me. All right. So this is looking at the detailed metrics for a CPE radio. This is a Tarana radio as well. And what happened here, this is a kind of a story that I got from one of our customers, and you can see that the RF score was really quite terrible, and then got much better. And what happened here, I just want to look at my notes here. So So this was an RN that needed to be reinstalled. So they said the original installation placed the RN on the side of the house because the customer didn't want any roof penetrations. And then what happened as a result is what you see here. That particular placement caused uplink issues, heartbeat failures to the BN, which resulted in temporary RN disconnections. And that customer later called in to support and reported intermittent service issues. So they explained that the resolution would be to install the RN on the peak of the roof instead. Customer approved it, and once they received approval, they reinstalled it on the roof and saw that significant improvement across all metrics. So he sent me some numbers. Path loss for this improved from 143 dB to 126 dB, and the center improved from 1715 to 2525. And you can see our RF score at the same time improved from -1 down here to like 5 to 6. And we can see the link rate charts as well. So you see that this is kind of like the one we looked at. It was getting, a pretty poor link rate, pretty
Yeah,
inconsistent.
blink.
And then
Yeah.
and then when this went up here, you can see it's much better. And this blue dotted line here, do you want to explain that, Jeremy? This is sort of the typical case.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be the typical for what's happening, I think, on that AP. And you could, it gives you another tool to say, well, is this what I would expect under these conditions? We've got a question from Jonathan as well, Scott. He's asking, how are we collecting this information for the CPE?
So we collect all
the RN,
we collect all this directly from the Tarana BN. So it has some statistics and performance metrics that it exposes. So we have a poller that sits in your network. Usually customers run it on a VM, and it reaches out to each BN and collects statistics from those BNs, and that it reports on all the links and the quality of the links and these metrics that you see here. It's basically the same data that you see in TCS. You can also see there's a change here you might notice on like just a couple of weeks ago where the rates drop. And what happened here is that this customer actually changed the profile on this Toronto radio from a profile 1 to a profile 2. And profile 2 has a different down to up ratio, which is a lower downstream to upstream speed. So you see the downstream drop as a result. And you also see that this typical RX line dropped at the same time because we're actually in a different statistical slice here when you change that down to up ratio.
And the same thing happened in reverse on the left-hand graph. You can see that link rate went up because the ratio of up to down changed.
Yeah, yep. Slightly, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so I've got a couple others here. So let's do this one. Okay, so this might be a support call type of example. Do you want to talk to this one, Jeremy?
Yeah, for sure. So this is an example where we can see that the subscribers' latency, their quality of experience is pretty bad here. And if you look at the chart on the right, where it says service faces AP, you can see that this isn't really the experience of all of the subscribers on this network. So the kind of the decision tree that you'd be making here is to say, okay, well, do I have a problem with the CPE, or is it possible that I have a problem past the demarcation? So if you want to hop up a level to the CPE, Scott, let's take a look at that score. And we have a really good RF score. So in this case, we can say, hey, I believe this customer has a Wi-Fi problem. They do not have a problem with the CPE. And that's just as helpful as knowing when you have a problem at the RF layers, knowing when you don't have a problem at the RF layer. So this would be an example of somebody who's, you should probably figure out how to fix their Wi-Fi, because they're going to blame you as an ISP. If you have managed Wi-Fi, even better. You can get some stats from that too. But we can detect, using this combination of inline metrics, if you have them, and the RF scores, you can do some really quick checks to see if there's a problem in the network or a problem in the customer home.
Yeah, and that can really make things more efficient and good for the customer on a support call too, right? So you can split that resolution path very quickly to, I need to work with the customer to figure out their Wi-Fi, or I need to escalate this up to the engineering or ops team to do our like the layer 2 support motion. So, customers will be happy because you won't be messing with them, like resetting their router and modem and that kind of thing, when you know that it's a network problem. And when you know it's not a network problem, then you can work with them.
Yeah, we've been finding customers that have begun deploying this kind of a workflow that, as Scott said before, just support in general. You can come to a root cause, and ideally first call resolution much faster. You're saving generally on the order of many minutes per call. Instead of having to go dig in and do a lot of sleuthing and looking at a bunch of different dashboards, you can make these escalation decisions right away.
We got a couple of questions that have come in. So one question is, how do you get to the access point subscriber capacity metrics? And so I guess what we should say here is that for Tarana, we do not yet do that metric. For Tarana, we are doing the RF score, which is related to the next question. And future, we will be looking at doing the rest of those scores for Tarana that we support across our supported vendor mix.
I hope that answers your question, Helen.
And then how's the RF score calculated? You want to get into the weeds there, Jeremy?
I don't really, Varden. But yeah, just basically, in fact, if you look in the app, we do give some details on this. I'm very happy to share it. So basically, we build a statistical profile for each configuration. And from that profile, we're able to then do, it's a very standard statistical calculation. And it essentially returns a z-score, which we do some scaling to kind of put that roughly between a 0 and 10 marking. And in this particular case of the RF score, we're looking at the upload speeds, the download speeds, or uplink and downlink rather. And then we're also looking at the overall stability, because in most environments, there's going to be some daily variation, whether it's temperature, atmospheric humidity. There's, a certain amount of variation is to be expected. And what we want to be able to tell without you having to have years of RF experience is that variation normal or is it abnormal? Like that very first example that Scott showed, where you were seeing this massive 3 or 4x variation throughout the day, because we were looking at that I think it was a 2-week chart. That was clearly an abnormal variation and kind of extreme. But we can catch more subtle examples of that. So essentially, the stability and the speed, Varden, are the primary components of that score.
Okay, let's do one more quick example because we've got this.
Just the plan.
This is the this is the plan. So in this case, this particular subscriber, you can see from his latency profile that the quality of experience is good. He's on a 50 meg plan. Looks like he's hitting it at peak. So if we look at a CPE radio here, this also looks very good. He's got a high score. He could.
This is the target. He's a good target for an upgrade, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you can integrate this into your sales or upgrade candidate process, and we do have an API to all this information as well. So some of our customers use our API to pull out these scores, and then they make that part of the criteria for whether a customer can be sold an upgrade and whether they can what they can be upgraded to. Okay. There was another question that came up. How do I see all this in my company and the network we use? We use several different types of equipment. I don't know. Did we sort of address that with just, if you go to your access points, and you can in this table sort of see.
That's assuming that you have advanced. This is in the context of advanced fixed wireless. So, Taryn, if you are a customer, that would be something that we can trial for you if you don't have that today. If you're not a customer, I recommend the same thing. Let's get a trial going, and let's see if we can accommodate the equipment that you have. We generally tend to support widely used equipment in the field pretty quickly.
Yeah, if you're on this webinar and you're not a Preseem customer and you don't work for Tarana, it'd be great to set you up with a trial. We have a free 30-day trial, and you don't need any equipment at all to try out any of what I've been showing you today. Our QoE product, you do need some equipment in the network, but for the platform and the advanced fixed wireless, you don't need anything except a VM to run our Polar on. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the slides. Awesome. So we got a little bit on what's next. So let's talk about the implications of Tarana's new G2 platform for this feature set.
Yeah, for sure, Scott. You know, my understanding, the primary differences that are going to be kind of interesting to us from a capacity perspective is, well, first and foremost, more capacity. The G2 product can really aggregate multiple bands, multiple discontiguous carriers, and it's going to be able to. It is in the field, I should say. It does. It is available today. It gives you a lot more capacity, and so we can use the same methodology where we're basically saying, hey, if you have this much spectrum that you're attempting to use, you know, let's make sure that you understand how well it's performing, particularly if you're in multiple bands, and you know, maybe you have one band that's experiencing more interference than another. You know, we want to be able to help you understand that, and then additionally, there'll be the ability to accommodate both a single and multi-band clients. So, for example, if you have a client that is just connecting on one band, I believe you've got that ability to connect to these called legacy clients, or even just less expensive clients like the RNV. You know, you're going to have a mix of clients in your network, and you want to be able to understand how they're all performing. And the RF scores are really going to be the easiest way to do that, I believe, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, everything's compared to its exact peers, like Jeremy's been saying, right? So even though you've got these very flexible carriers on the new Tarana G2 platform, we'll be able to compare the CPEs to their like counterparts that are using the same frequency bands. So you can see what you should be able to achieve versus what you're able to achieve. So what's good and what's bad from an RF perspective. And you know, we can't do a webinar without talking about AI, or really even have a conversation without talking about AI. So let's talk about some of what we're thinking about there. I think AI is going to be really important to the future of running an ISP, and to the future of running a SaaS business like ours as well, to be honest. So couple of so in my opinion, like the sort of way this evolves is that the role of any employee of an ISP, whether that's ops, support, engineering, like I think it's going to evolve because of the abilities of AI to reason and execute workflows on their own and achieve objectives. I think it evolves from a world where you're doing the work to a world where you're supervising the work that's being done by automation. And so we're looking at how that automation can be used, and how we can implement some of that automation with the sort of normalized data layer and the historical statistics that we have in Preseem. So a couple of use cases there. There's support use cases. So bringing it back to what we're talking about today, we have an API to our RF scores already. So this is a little less future-y than now, but we have customers that are using that API to pull the scores when a customer calls in, and that can be integrated right into their IVR system, so that somebody calls in, they get the RF scores. Is it a poor RF score? Okay, then that IVR doesn't even go to a level 1 support agent. That immediately brings them right up to level 2, because we know there's a real
We know
problem,
there's
and
a network problem. Yeah.
they need to talk to somebody that can help them at a more advanced level.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, Scott, because you know when we envisioned these scores originally, we were thinking of them from the operational perspective, you know, the proactive. But we're finding that there's really they can still be used in reactive cases as well. Like, you know, we can't assume that the operational side, you know, is always going to have the resources that it needs to prioritize. And having the actual customer complaints tied in with the data that we're giving you can also really help you validate, you know, where the trouble areas in your network. And this is a good opportunity for growth here.
Yeah. And then the other example that I like to use is the sort of post-install quality control. So if you look at that example I showed earlier where the RN was just installed in a poor location, really it's a job of network ops often to QC post-install post-install that were done. So an install is done at some point. Ops will either sample jobs and see that they met the criteria that you set out for whatever it is, path loss, RSSI, whatever criteria you have. Hopefully the Preseem RF score is part of that criteria. Um, so in the future, that this is some work that can very easily be handed off to AI, right? An AI agent can detect when a new install was done. It can check that install against company-specific thresholds or just sort of industry best practices such as path loss, RF score, RSSI. It can catch problems with new installs. It can automatically integrate with your ticketing system and submit a ticket to the right person. The quicker you can do that, the better it is for the customer. And at some point, maybe that's even done before the installer leaves customer premises, and they can just fix a bad job before they even leave. So those are some thoughts we have on the AI front.
Yep. And we've discovered this also, when we just talk about agents, there are a lot of things that we can do using this data, even kind of the pre-processing side that can be fed into these agents, where if you do that same troubleshooting workflow and you do it via an algorithm, there's a lot of useful data that you can get out, as Scott has given some examples of customers using this today already as part of their internal support workflows. So watch this space. We have a lot of fun stuff in the works. That's the best I can tell you right now.
Yeah,
It's a
no, I
fun
mean
space.
we're always looking for customers that want to work with us on this. And so if you think this is interesting and you want to be a sort of a beta customer for some of this stuff and give us some early feedback, feel free to reach out to me or Jeremy, and our contact information will be at the end of this presentation.
Excellent.
All right, and
Ooh.
now we've got a celebrity with us today, so I'm happy to introduce Drew Beverage, COO of 360 Broadband. He can kind of introduce himself, but I mean, Drew's been in the industry forever, doing different things, so we're very pleased to have him with us.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Jeremy. It was actually fun to listen to. I was, marking off my talking points as you guys went through and stole everything I was going to talk about. So we're done. We're done now. No, my name is Drew Beverage. I've been, as Scott says, I've been in the industry a while. I think we'll go with the 25 plus years Jeremy landed on earlier. I enjoy every minute of it, and so it's fun to be in an industry that's always growing, always changing. And being from originally on the installation side of things, out in the field building infrastructure towers, now moving inside sales, business development, somehow lobbying in there, and then now we're at landed where we are. But I think one of the biggest things I circled multiple times that you guys talked about in the beginning of this was the data aspect of what Preseem brings, and compiling all of that data to one spot. And so I think that's what draws our team to it. And I will shout out the 360 NetOps team. They really dig into this data, really train our support team and agents, and so I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Cool. So we got kind of a list of questions to ask you, and we can just kind of see where things go from there. But first question is, were there immediate benefits you noticed after using the RF scores for your Tarana deployments, and what were they?
Yeah, so actually, kind of some of the talking points that you guys hit on earlier was the RF scores having a baseline, right? And so knowing once we get an installation completed, say we had a successful install, like you guys mentioned, QCing that install, everything looked good. Site was on. We're selling a 400 meg plan. 3 or 4 weeks later down the road, that RF score is starting to drop, and now we're seeing that they're not able to reach their plan. And are we going to send a truck to make sure they're achieving that so they're not having a poor service? And on the other side of that coin, having a list of RF scores and customers that are reaching some of their bandwidth limitations because of their rate they chose, but they have plenty of room to go up, right? So you can use that data both directions. One, to qualify, are they getting what you're selling them? And two, should you sell them more because they're needing more? And so we've been able to implement that into the workflow, and then easily identify by what those RF scores are looking at.
Fantastic.
Cool.
I
Yeah.
had a conversation, with Larry, your your chief brain over there, Drew.
Yes.
And we were saying we wish he could be on here, but when we talk about the operational side, again, the RF scores originally, we kind of were steering toward ops, and we're finding out, okay, there are these support cases too. So, like, are you finding that these are being helpful in both, or is this something that you're still like? Is there do you feel like the teams are achieving parity here, support versus ops, or are you still thinking that like there's more growth on the proactive side? What are you thinking?
I think a little bit of both. You guys mentioned obviously, on the proactive side, being able to see. I think we have 1,700 Tarana RNs out there, and we see about 55 of them that are flagging, that are in a critical condition, and we dive into those, right? And we know that we replaced some 2.5 spectrum LTE, and we didn't get the signals that we wanted, but they were buried in trees, right? And the crazy part is the performance from the Tarana G1 from the legacy platform they were on. Those customers are not complaining, right? So looking at that from that RF score to seeing what they were achieving before, it's night and day. So even though we're seeing it as a flag, they're saying, "Hey, don't touch it. Like, don't come back and move this at all." And so we understand that we have some, but being able to have a baseline to go off of and understand, this is where we should be. This is where we want our installs to be. This is how we keep a clean network. I think that's the proactive side. Um, we haven't, like you guys mentioned, we haven't hit capacity on any of our BNs. Tarana didn't pay me to say that. I know we're sitting at 147 on one and 150 on one, and we're not seeing it through our RF scores based on the capacity side of it yet.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and we wouldn't expect to see. I believe we wouldn't expect to see RF degradation. That's really going to be a very interesting point, though. Is where does it tap out? We haven't seen that. You're right. And 150 is quite impressive. The idea that
I wouldn't have believed it.
that this is propping up Varden here is on the call. I'd just say the other vendors for sure we've seen we've seen similar numbers, but not at this kind of quality of experience and just aggregate capacity for sure.
And I think we talked offline about the profile 1 to profile 2 change, and being able to see that and understand and having any type of data metrics to see, did we provide a worse service by making these changes. And then I think we dug into that and looked really closely at the data to see if there was any effect on that change. And so far we haven't seen any. So having metrics and data to be able to point back, it's like, okay, let's, like this has affected the customer experience. Let's roll back, having the knobs and levers to turn.
Exactly. It gives you these, operational tools to go do these kind of virtual experiments in real life, right? To say, okay, is this a positive change? Yeah, that's something I didn't highlight when I was talking about the RF scores. Thanks for bringing that up. But that can be one of the most difficult things. You say, well, particularly if you're going to like try stuff that doesn't involve a truck roll first, maybe you're messing with timing, maybe you're messing with channel, to be able to then empirically say, hey, the scores went up, the scores went down. I didn't show the trends, but yeah, we've got these trending indicators on the scores. That's a really good case. Thanks, Drew.
Yes, one of the things that we can do is sync with our competitors, right? And so with the Tarana, we're able to say, okay, let's get on the same timing, and then that'll eliminate some interference potentially, and then sync those together so we can see those changes and with those RF scores too, to see if it makes any effect. I think that's a feature, knowing that you're not making something worse, right? It's all about the customer experience in the end. And I think you guys mentioned multiple things that I highlighted, specifically the single pane of glass for support, the employee training. I wrote that down and highlighted it and circled it. Being able to have multi-vendor into a platform, being able to, hey, I'm going to pull this up and be able to see everything throughout the network. It's a big thing. Yeah, it would be nice to have one platform, right? One product all across the board.
So can you talk a bit about how you use the RF scores to help you identify at-risk customers before they complain and cancel service, and maybe a little bit what your internal process is for that? I think people would be interested to know.
Yeah, so we have our Larry and team there. They definitely flag anything that is at risk compared to RF scores, network degradation, potential customer that's not hitting the rate that they're paying for, and obviously we don't want to decrease ARPU or decrease our operational. So let's reach out to them. Maybe something's changed, environment's changed. They need to go on the roof, things like that. Let's get our team out there, professionals, to make sure we're getting that installation correct, right? So proactively looking at it from that angle. We do also use AI to tie phone calls to customers that call in from different access points using Preseem. So we're able to understand how many complaints we get from specific APs, and then be able to understand it from there. So not only do you have the RF score, but you have a squeaky wheel backing up, the grease. And so understanding it from an operational point, it's definitely data driven decisions at that point, and being proactive to keep the network healthy. And sometimes maybe it doesn't make operational sense if you have a populated area that's not growing, but you have to look at your churn risk, right? So you have your customer acquisition cost, your churn risk, and then your how much growth is potential in that area. And so some of those factors move into it. But I think you know um, the time it would take to gather all of these data points and make data driven decisions on every, I think with 360 we have over 1,000 access points, right? And so it would be a job on its own, multiple people's jobs, to look at this and keep this data in their head, and then how does it get sent out to the team to be actual usable, right?
Mhm.
So packaging it up to make it a collection point to know actionable data. That's where we're going to go down to actionable data.
Right. Okay. Are there any examples where you've been able to correlate RF score improvements on your Toronto gear with reduced customer support calls? I know you talked a little bit about how you're doing some automation around that. You have any sort of data or examples you could share?
Man, we're still gathering. We looked at this for a while, and understanding obviously phone data tied to Tarana deployment scores. Unfortunately, unclear at this point. Are out of the 1,672 or so active RNs, um, very little. Our churn rate is lower on Tarana, and our phone call volume is lower on Tarana. So we're gathering that information. We'll have more to share.
Okay.
Yeah, when you don't have a lot of data points, it can be hard to detect a trend for a while.
Yeah.
Certainly, I was even thinking like that, having 150 on an AP, you're going to get something statistically useful from those customers. So
Yeah.
as you grow that out, that's going to be really a fun opportunity for. I'm the data guy, right? I was like, show me the data. Sometimes
Yeah.
you get surprised, like you come in with the idea thinking, hey, this is going to be. I mean, the idea. I'll give an example. Surprising that your churn rates on Tarana could be better. Be equivalent to fiber. And
Yeah.
we've heard that from multiple companies. It's interesting to really see the data bear that out.
When we I mean, a fun fact, we obviously AI through all of our call systems, and we asked it specifically on cancellations based on when someone left us on some of our legacy wireless, why did they leave? And was it price or speed? And the answer the customer gave was speed. And so it was just an interesting combo of thought, like that they would rather pay more for more, even though they weren't even using it, but the customer thought process was they wanted faster. And so a data point that I would think would be related to price was not. They wanted speed even though they weren't using it. So interesting enough.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, and it's one of those things that I don't know if we ever really want customers to know exactly how much or how little they use, but it's certainly interesting to see what it takes to hold on to a customer today.
What was I think you guys had the last report was like 6.8, 7.2. What did it go up to this last
Oh no, it's
report
not
that you
even
guys
that
sent
high
out?
yet.
Not that high. Okay.
A year ago it was just under 4, so I
Okay.
would expect it to be somewhere around 5, maybe a little under 5 this year. We haven't run that yet, but that's our ISP network report that we produce, for the consumption by the entire industry. And that's peak busy hour. So that doesn't necessarily tell you what rates do you need in order to deliver a good experience. Those are definitely closer to. I think I was looking at it recently where if you're still serving single-digit plans, for example, like those customers are constrained. They're going to be pegging that plan all the time. But generally, oh yes, thanks for the link, Angie. Generally, if we're dealing with anywhere in the, let's say around 75 megs or so, it's really hard to see a significant increase in consumption. Consumption does go up as you go, past 100, 200, 300, these multi-hundred and gigabit plans, but the rate of climb is much lower than it is below that inflection point. So it's more just a matter of it being a little opportunistic rather than it meeting a real application need, that the customer needs those applications today. Most people don't. And that's one of the reasons that we're seeing success with something like Tarana in a market that also has fiber, because if you can really deliver, if you can kind of hit that speed test, the user's not going to have a problem actually using the internet and having a good experience.
We've had a lot of success in the small business market with Tarana, being able to compete head on with downtown locations, cable plant that is not able to get the upload they're needing, and being able to serve off of Tarana. So I think use case, we've converted over 60 small businesses in one small town. So been fantastic to see, being able to provide 400 to 700 megs with 100 meg upload has been the game changer there. So
crazy. We're kind of running low on time here, and so that's a perfect segue for me to say that I'm doing a session on Monday in Vegas at Wispapalooza where I'm talking about hybrid edge networks. I'm going to use your example, Drew. That's going to be a really good one. And are you coming this year, Drew, to Vegas?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Fantastic. Are you doing any sessions?
Yes, so I'm going to be 2:30 to 5 on the 14th on AI. So we'll talk about some of the cool things that we're working with there, and then I'll be joining Actify on Sales AI on one of those days. I'll get that time.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Scott,
so
sessions, right?
I have a security session early on Wednesday morning if you like getting up early on network security for ISPs. So all three of us will be in Vegas next week. So if you are going to be there, you can stop by the Preseem booth, talk to Jeremy or I, and Drew's easy to find walking around as well.
Yeah, we're gonna have a good team there as well. In case you can't find us, anybody at Preseem. Sadly, Angie will not be there, but we will have a good team. And I don't enjoy. I'll be honest. I don't enjoy going to Vegas, but I enjoy being with the crowd that comes to WISPA. It is something I look forward to every year.
I would concur with that. 1,500 of our best friends and enemies all in one spot. Let's go.
Let's do it. Let's do it. All
right. So I think we got to wrap things up. We got like less than a minute left. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. We appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you next week and or at a future webinar.